Fareed Zakaria did some interesting commentary on free speech in college campuses that kind of blew up online. Let's listen to it, and then I want to break it down.
Season, and across the nation, people are imparting their words of wisdom to newly minted graduates. To name just a few, Joe Biden was at Harvard and Cornell, Oprah spoke at Skidmore, and I was honored to give the commencement speech at Bucknell this year. But at Notre Dame, where Vice President Mike Pence was giving the commencement address, the ceremonies were interrupted when about 100 students turned their backs on Pence and walked out in protest. A few weeks earlier, U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos was booed while giving the commencement address at Bethune-Cookman University. I talked about this issue at Bucknell, and I wanted to share those thoughts here. American universities these days seem committed to every kind of diversity except intellectual diversity. Conservative voices and views, already a besieged minority, are being silenced entirely. The campus thought police have gone after serious conservative thinkers like Heather McDonald and Charles Murray, as well as firebrands like Milo Yiannopoulos and Ann Coulter. Some were disinvited, others booed, interrupted, and intimidated. It's strange that this is happening on college campuses that promise to give their undergraduates a liberal education. The word liberal in this context has nothing to do with today's partisan language, but refers instead to the Latin root, pertaining to liberty. And at the heart of the liberal tradition in the Western world has been freedom of speech. From the beginning, people understood that this meant protecting and listening to speech with which you disagreed. Oliver Wendell Holmes once said that when we protect freedom of thought, we are protecting freedom for the thought that we hate. Freedom of speech and thought is not just for warm, fuzzy ideas that we find comfortable. It's for ideas that we find offensive. There is, as we all know, a kind of anti-intellectualism on the right these days. The denial of facts, of reason, of science. But there is also an anti-intellectualism on the left, an attitude of self-righteousness that says we are so pure, we are so morally superior, we cannot bear to hear an idea with which we disagree. Liberals think they are tolerant, but often they aren't. In 2016, a Pew study found Democrats were more likely to view Republicans as close-minded, but each side scores about the same in terms of close-mindedness and hostility to hearing contrarian views. And large segments on both sides consider the other to be immoral, lazy, dishonest, and unintelligent. This is not just about tolerance for its own sake. The truth is, no one has a monopoly on right or virtue. Listening to other contradictory views will teach us all something and sharpen our own views. One of the greatest dangers in life, whether it be in business or government, is to get trapped in a bubble of groupthink and never ask, what if I'm wrong? What is the best argument on the other side? As I said at Bucknell, there is also a broader benefit to society. Technology, capitalism, and globalization are strong forces pulling us apart as a society. By talking to each other seriously and respectfully about agreements and disagreements, we can come together in a common conversation, recognizing that while we seem so far apart, we do actually have a common destiny.
So a lot of what he's saying there I think is true, but I think he's missing certain aspects of it. So to the general idea, the broad idea here of, yeah, there's this rise on the left of cracking down on opinions, thoughts that they don't agree with. Yes, that's happening. Microaggressions are ridiculous. Safe spaces are ridiculous. What's the other one I'm missing? There's microaggressions. There's safe spaces. Damn, am I really blanking on this? Trigger warnings. Trigger warnings are ridiculous. Yeah, so this is what I call the authoritarian left, as opposed to the libertarian left. The authoritarian left likes to control on social issues and isn't kind of like live and let live on social issues. And they're a problem. And I also think they fuel the rise of the right. People turn to the right when they think like, oh, is everybody on the left like authoritarian leftists? Because I don't like that. I don't like the constant culture of shaming when somebody says something like when somebody makes a joke that's, you know, probably not a good joke, but then there's the pile on and the shaming and trying to get that person to lose their job and all that shit. Like, yes, that does happen on the left for sure. And it's something that we need to take care of. The libertarian left should be dominant on the left. And I think it is, by the way, dominant on the left. You get college kids get goofy when they're on college campuses and they act like that. But I think as they grow up and they get a little more mature, liberals tend to focus more on things that make more sense, like ending wars and getting free healthcare and stuff like that. But yes, he's right that there's a problem and it should be acknowledged. But I think he lacks nuance in how he's talking about it. So when you talk about deplatforming speakers and disinviting them, that's what I think is a restriction on free speech. And I've defended people like Milo Yiannopoulos, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, even though I despise them and I think they're ridiculous people. I've defended them because they should be able to speak. They shouldn't be disinvited and deplatformed. But unlike Fareed Zakaria, he brought up Mike Pence and them walking out during his speech. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all, and I don't think that shows liberal intolerance. I think that's free protest. As long as they don't disinvite him or deplatform him, I don't see what the problem is. That freedom cuts both ways, big guy. So Mike Pence has the freedom to give that speech and say ridiculous things, but he's also a corrupt Christian fundamentalist who doesn't believe in evolution and credits his career to Rush Limbaugh. So I have the freedom to not listen to that jackass spew bullshit at me for an hour straight. So if I was part of that graduation ceremony, I would have walked out too. And no, I'm not restricting his freedom. I'm not going up there and taking the mic away from him. I'm not deplatforming him. I just don't want to hear this asshole. So I have the freedom to not hear that asshole. So don't lump that in with like, oh, disinviting people. I'm not disinviting him. I just don't want to hear him because I think he's a fucking idiot. He's a corrupt idiot. So I'm going to leave. Thank you very much, Fareed. And there's nothing intolerant about that. There's something intelligent about that. I don't like to be bullshit, whatever, by Mike Pence. And then the booing is in this weird middle ground. Like, if you're booing to the point where they can't say anything, then yeah, you're kind of restricting their speech because you're drowning them out. But if there's like a little bit of heckling, I don't see what's wrong with that. The person up there is an idiot and a jackass, and it's not that I think they have the wrong opinions. No, he is objectively wrong about many things that we can point to and say, oh, you are wrong about this. He's been front and center in various corrupt deals. Am I not allowed to protest his corruption? Am I not allowed to protest him not believing in evolution? Am I not allowed to protest him crediting fucking Rush Limbaugh for his career? Am I not allowed to protest him saying I want to be like Dick Cheney? Fuck off. Of course I could protest that. The freedom cuts both ways. Again, the problem is disinviting or deplatforming or totally drowning them out when they're trying to give the speech. That's what gets me, because then that is a restriction of freedom. But I don't think like walking out is a restriction of freedom in any sense. So I think he's lacking nuance in that portion of the conversation. And then when he says, oh, conservatives are a besieged minority. Yeah, on college campuses, sure, you can make that point. But you have to remember, Fareed, they run the country. So that's not really a great point, because you don't add the context of, oh, and by the way, Republicans hold the presidency, they hold the Senate, they hold the House of Representatives, they hold the majority of state legislatures, and they hold the majority of governorships. So if they run everything in the country, but you portray it as simply a besieged minority, you're not given the full picture. Now, again, on college campuses, that probably is the case, but also some of that on college campuses is liberals and progressives are just more likely to get involved in education and the arts. It just is what it is. It's like saying, you know, there's liberals and Democrats are a besieged minority in NASCAR or on the hunting channel. Well, yeah, because that's a field that conservatives are just more likely to get into and liberals are not more likely to get into. Education is a field. Science, education, the arts, liberals are just more likely to get into that field. So that point is, I take his point, but it's also a little overstated. I do want to see diversity of thought, but then that leads to the next point, which is we should have diversity of thought, but we shouldn't let that cross the line into apologetics for people who are incorrect. So in other words, when I point out, hey, climate science is happening and evolution is real, some people on the right are going to say, oh, you're don't take away my free speech, to say the opposite. No, but I'm not taking away your free speech. I'm just saying you're objectively wrong. And I'm saying in science class, you have to teach science, meaning evolution, not creationism. Don't allow it in there. It's not fucking science. And climate change is happening, not climate change is a fucking hoax. Because climate change is happening, and we should discuss that, and don't give the opposite view, because it's not equal. These things aren't equal. So we also have to be careful not to use free speech as an excuse to let people get away with saying things that are factually incorrect. Like when Trump says, hey, let's take out their families, kill family members of ISIS, murder civilians on purpose, and I say, hey man, that's terrorism, that's the definition of terrorism, you want to kill civilians on purpose for a political reason. People go, oh, how dare you shut down his free speech. I'm not shutting down his free speech, I'm saying he's objectively wrong and he wants to violate international law. So don't muddy the waters. We have to be clear about something that's free speech and something that's, yes, it's free speech, you could say that, but you're also just wrong and I'm going to shit on it because you're wrong. And the final thing I want to say here is they're also making it too much of a black and white issue. Like, oh, liberals suppress speech, conservatives don't. Anna Kasparian of TYT was disinvited to speak because there were people on a board at a school who were pro-Trump and they didn't like things she had said about Trump supporters. By the way, I don't agree with some of the stuff she says about Trump supporters, but I still would let her speak because free speech. Again, speeches at college campuses. I defend Milo Yiannopoulos. I defend Ben Shapiro. I defend Steven Crowder. I'm going to defend Anna too, obviously. It cuts both ways. Rania Khalek was disinvited from speaking because people don't like her stance on Syria. Rania Khalek is a leftist through and through. She's a left-winger. So, again, suppression of a left-winger. How about there's been multiple pro-Palestinian professors who've been fired and not for their pro-Palestinian activism, but also they haven't been allowed to give speeches. So there you go, suppression of a left-wing viewpoint happening from the right. So it's not like he frames it like it's all a left-wing, political correctness is all a left-wing problem. No, there's also right-wing PC police. Like, for example, there's been GOP laws popping up all over the country since Trump's been elected, cracking down on protests. There's protests against the Trump administration, against Republicans, in North Carolina specifically. That's just one of the examples I know of. So they pass all these laws that try to criminalize protesting. There's a real threat to free speech, and Fareed Zakaria doesn't say anything about that. Or the fact that Donald Trump himself sued Bill Maher over a joke, threatened to sue The Onion over a satire article about him, said we need to open up our libel laws to allow suing of journalists, said flag burning should be banned. How about that crackdown from the right on free speech, free expression, and the First Amendment? He's correct on the broad point, but he's not being specific enough, he's not being nuanced enough, and he's totally blind to the fact that a lot of these PC problems also exist on the right, including the fucking president, the Republican president. So I felt like this needed more context and a further conversation. He's right on the broad point, but he's missing a lot of finer points here. And he seems totally blind to the right-wing PC police problem. And if you don't think that's an issue, go talk to Kathy Griffin. Now, granted, what she did was tasteless. She held up a fake beheaded head of Donald Trump. But she was fired over it. She lost her job at CNN as the New Year's Eve fucking host thingy. And her other advertisers have fled from her. All because she did something that was politically incorrect. Not illegal. Not illegal. And Obama was killed in effigy many times. And the right was fine with it. When Kathy Griffin does it, oh, get her fired. Get her fired. But we love free speech and free expression in the First Amendment. But fire her because she did the wrong thing. That was free expression. So it cuts both ways, Fareed. Just know that.